You are listening to Wrestling Observer Live with your hosts, Brian Alvarez and Mike Sempervive.
Are you ready? Are you ready?
Let's get it on!
Hello again, everybody. Welcome to the show. Mike Sempervive here with you. Still flying solo, as it will be for the next few days. Well, Boss Man takes a few days off. He'll be back later on this week. But don't worry, we don't need him. Just each other. Because there's never a shortage of things to talk about. This weekend, no different. UFC 236 last night in Atlanta. And if last week was the high water mark for pro wrestling matches, then Saturday night was the UFC's equivalent. 2 Fight of the Year candidates, 2 new interim champions, Israel Adesanya, Dustin Poirier, your new kinda sorta lightweight and middleweight champions. Interim belts are often the worst, by far worse in boxing, if you can believe it. But there's a little bit of light at the end of this tunnel as both men look like their interim reigns have real ends in sight. And they're exciting ends. Adesanya's is super clear. He's got Robert Whittaker whenever Whittaker recovers from the hernia. And likely has in front of him a ridiculous number of people at a soccer stadium in Australia. Dana White wouldn't commit to that last night. You have both of those guys. It's a no-brainer. So that's going to be big, and it's probably going to be some point in this fall. What also may be this fall would be Dustin Poirier in a title shot against Khabib. Now, his path is a little more convoluted. Not for any other reason except for there are bigger personalities that are at play in that division. You got Khabib, you got Conor. You got Conor dragging in Nate Diaz's name last night, so we can get into that if you want. Almost 20 years after his debut, Rich Franklin's been announced to go to the UFC Hall of Fame. Do you want to opine about feeling some sort of way about Sasha Banks reportedly, allegedly, possibly feeling some sort of way? I'm going to open that door for you because I'm sure some of you out there would love to talk about that. Top 3 matches of last Saturday's New Japan and ROH show aired on Access TV. If you didn't get a chance to see the show when it aired live and had a chance to see it on Access TV, I'd love to hear what you think. Kushida has descended upon NXT, and it's very difficult for me to believe that he's not going to be a player. Already, he's off to a great start, and I'll fill you in on what's going on there. All that stuff and so much more. You got something to say? Get it off your chest. 1-800-878-PLAY, 1-800-878-7529. We'll be back to get this thing started. Wrestling Observer Live. We are here with you every single day, live Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, noon Pacific, 7 GMT. Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 Pacific, 10 GMT. For those of you listening internationally, American Forces Radio, tune in. Some of the many ways to check us out. Appreciate you letting us into your homes and your heads. Extra special hello for Sirius XM Fight Nation 156 and Dan Patrick Radio 211 fans. Thank you for joining me. Wouldn't be a Sunday without you. It also wouldn't be a Sunday if we didn't start the phones at 1-800-878-PLAY without Ryan in Cumberland, Maryland. Ryan, how are you?
Good. My question today is about the women's match at WrestleMania. Have you heard anything how the women were paid for the main event? Because I'm just a little concerned that maybe they could have been the lowest paid of all the WrestleManias that existed because now, I know they're not Impact Wrestling, but I know TNA, when they main evented with Awesome Kong and Gail Kim, they paid Gail Kim so little she had to go back to WWE just to get, less of a push but more money.
Ryan, stop right there. Ronda Rousey was in the main event at WrestleMania, and even if you want to say with the network, people don't get a cut of the pay-per-view money anywhere, even if you wanted to say that, would you not believe that Ronda Rousey is getting paid as much or more as anybody else on that roster, maybe with the exception of John Cena and Brock Lesnar?
You have a point there, but I'm more concerned about, say, Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair that don't have that crossover appeal like Ronda Rousey does.
I don't think I'm crying for either one of those women. I don't think I'd have to worry at all about all of the people that were on that show. You really... your heart is going out for them as far as what do you think your payoffs were? It is difficult for me to believe that there are any issue with payoffs, especially in a case like Becky Lynch where, I mean, look at the amount of merchandise the man shirts are probably selling. So I'm surprised that you have your heartstrings are being tugged on for those women in the main event. It's not being tugged on for Sasha and Bayley? I figured you'd have more concern for them.
No, because they weren't the main event. They were the mid-card. And I think Sasha's just in this to be like CM Punk to get like a better deal because Vince likes those wrestlers that throw a fit, and he just more money because it shows that they have testicular fortitude.
Ryan, I want to thank you very much for the call. That's not it at all. Compare Sasha Banks to CM Punk so we can get a better deal. Yeah. CM Punk's better deal would be WWE's universe completely imploding, and good. He would not miss a beat about that. Keep with the phones. Jim in Virginia. Jim, how are you?
Hey, how you doing today, Mike?
I'm making it. What's happening?
Too much. Listen, what is this new channel that TNA Impact Wrestling is on, Pursuit channel? I never heard of it before.
It is owned by their parent company, Anthem, up in Canada. It has got It doesn't have much distribution seemingly down here in the States. There are a couple of cable companies that have picked it up. Some of your major ones like Xfinity and, if I'm not mistaken, Time Warner and some others. A lot of the big players don't. They apparently have some pretty good, I guess, some decent reach, I guess, on satellite and some things like that. But even then, it's a channel that gets lost in the mix. So, yeah, I mean, they kind of are focusing what it seems to be. They're kind of pushing people more towards, a lot of people towards YouTube and Twitch and other platforms as well, too, because to see it live, in your traditional way over cable, it seems like it's going to be a huge pain in the rear end.
Right. I heard a rumor that the finish for the women's match at WrestleMania was botched. Is that any truth to that?
Well, the issue with it was that Ronda Rousey's shoulder was up, and that was not supposed to be the case. It was not supposed to lead or build towards anything else. It was supposed to be a surprise pin. She was going to get pinned. She was going to argue, and Becky would still be holding the belts up. Now, you can debate whether that was the proper way that they should have Becky Lynch go over Ronda Rousey, but that's the way they decided to go. The issue came with the fact that Ronda's shoulder was up, and that was accidental. And what happened was the referee, I think his name is Rod Zapata, was fined by Vince McMahon, a shoot fine, a real fine by Vince McMahon, because he is supposed to call that as a shoot. Referees in most places in the WWE are supposed to be able to call that as a shoot. He did not. He went and smacked the mat, and that was it. And again, it was the right thing to do because that's what the finish was, but it was the wrong thing to do in a way because Ronda's shoulder was up. They could have on the fly said, hey, it's only 2, and Becky could have done something else, rolled her up, schoolboy, whatever they do, so she gets a clean, decisive pin. But how it worked out, nobody's really going to complain about it too much. Becky Lynch fans are still going to be happy she was holding up both belts, and if there's a blessing to this, already had Ronda Rousey not being submitted by either Charlotte or Becky, so she could always come back if she decides to come back. And now you have that little extra asterisk that you can hang from it as well, too, which was my shoulder was never down. You guys were trying to screw me or whatever you want to put. So they'll make, like all these types of situations, or at least many of these types of situations that have happened in wrestling over the years. You just take that little thing and you take those lemons and you make lemonade out of them.
One last thing. What do we do? What do we do with Oscar now?
We'll see with the Superstar Shakeup. And Jim, I want to thank you very much for your call.
Take care, Mike.
That's going to be taking place now. You too. I appreciate you calling in, my man. We'll see what happens here in the next couple of days. I decided to hold off on talking too much about it because I'm sure tomorrow is going to be filled with talk about where people would go or could go in the Superstar Shakeup. It is notable, I guess it's notable at least, that with some of the people they've called up from NXT that have not been designated a brand, in the graphic that they have for the show coming up tomorrow, they actually have those guys and girls in the middle, and along with those guys and girls in the middle who are unaffiliated, Sami Zayn is one of those people, which is interesting because he was a member of Raw the last time he was on the shows, but I guess it really doesn't matter either way. And he's in the middle, and everybody's up in the air, and nobody's going to have any idea where they go until way later on down the line. And we'll see who they bring up from NXT, if they bring up anybody at all. We'll see some of the directions they take because I don't know. Right now it really just depends on what brand she falls on, and then you can start putting the matchups together. I think in a lot of people's perfect worlds, that doesn't exist. Io Shirai gets called up. Kairi Sane gets called up. Shayna Baszler gets called up. And then you have Asuka, and you have her doing battle with all of them. as well as the women's division. If you're going to go with that type of fantasy booking women's division, I guess you also put Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch and, whoever your favorites are, you can kind of lump them in there too. But that would, I don't think they're going to go in that direction. And for all we know, we could get, heel Asuka against Carmella. We could get Asuka against Sonya Deville, which I'll be honest with you. That's not the worst idea in the world. And I know some people are just throwing their radios or their phones right now at the thought of that. But if you're going to try to develop Sonya Deville into something, and she's got a good story, she's got a good look, the team with Mandy Rose is good, even though they're going to break him up, and they've already teased this far too early. What better person than Asuka to kind of to try to help Sonya Deville along? She's really early in this game. And we don't talk about it much because we talk about, some other people on that show where it's in another world, she wouldn't even be close to this roster. Forget about Lacey Evans. Sonya Deville, she only started wrestling how long ago? I think she was brought in. It was Maria Menounos. I think it was friendly with her. It was something like that where she got in, but she hasn't been in this thing for a long time. So if you're going to try to develop her the best she can on national TV by herself, because the reality is at some point, Mandy Rose is going to be nowhere near her, and it may be as soon as this week, and she'll be glowing all by herself somewhere else. How do you help Sonya along? I think Asuka would actually be a really, really good opponent for that. See what you think about it, though. 1-800-878-PLAY. 1-800-878-7529. If you want to get a hold of us on Twitter, we're always available there, at Sempervive, at Sports Byline USA, and at WONF4W, WrestlingObserver.com, for all your news and updates and all that sort of stuff. A lot more to get into when we get back from break. UFC 236, Rich Franklin, Kushida, so much more. Wrestling Observer Live. Mighty Joe Thunder on Twitter, responding to Ryan in Cumberland, Maryland. Have you tried reaching out to Becky and Charlotte about the WrestleMania payoffs to express your concern? Let us not encourage him. If you think you can do a better job than Ryan in Cumberland, Maryland on the phones, I challenge you to do so. I think you can. 1-800-878-PLAY, 1-800-878-7529. We'll find out. Chris, what's on your mind?
So listen, I've been kind of going back and forth a lot with the Sasha Banks thing, and I kind of do the same thing whenever I hear that there's some wrestlers in WWE that aren't happy with where they are. First of all, just as a side note, with the Superstar Shakeup coming up, I believe that nobody should be brought from NXT to Raw or SmackDown, only for the simple fact that they got so much up there right now that they're not doing anything with. Try doing what you can with what you have, and then maybe bring some people from the Raw SmackDown to NXT. But that's just a side note. Sasha Banks not being happy, I get it, because she was huge in NXT. Her and Bayley had one of the best women's matches I've ever seen. I still think it holds up, that takeover match. And then they get brought to Raw and SmackDown, Raw or SmackDown, and they're just not. They're not used the way that they were used before. I get it. They're pissed, and maybe she wants to go somewhere else. And everybody who's not happy, everybody all has that response whenever they see it on Twitter, which is, you've seen it, that GIF of zooming down the hallway and Cody Rhodes is at the end of it holding his ear, come to AEW kind of a thing. Sasha Banks really does need to sit back and kind of weigh the options a little bit, because if she was to leave and go somewhere else, first of all, I don't know who she would be, but she wouldn't be Sasha Banks. That's 100% owned by WWE. So she's going to have to go reinvent herself, or probably use a bite off of what she has established herself with in WWE. So she's going to have to go there, and there's no guarantee that she's going to have the same kind of success. And there's also no guarantee that AEW or Ring of Honor or anybody else would use her in the way that she sees fit. Yeah, she's a name. She's an image. She's a good personality. But at the end of the day, AEW is going to try to establish themselves. And again, like I said, anybody who's pissed off at WWE and how they're being used, everyone says go to AEW. Well, if they did that, then AEW is NXT circa 2016.
Chris, I want to thank you very much for the call. I feel what you're saying, because, I don't know, she's really, she only just turned 27, She's very, very young, and she was in, we had, who was it? I can't remember. Where did she work? Chaotic. That's where it was. It was Chaotic Wrestling. And Max Smashmaster was on and talking about training her and everything, but she wasn't out there on the scene for too long. She didn't get a ton of experience. It wasn't like a Mercedes Martinez or a cheerleader Melissa. And by the way, too, Sasha Banks' real name is Mercedes, so she's at least got that going for her. I'm not sure what kind of marketing she can do with that, but maybe she can come out to the old Pebbles song or something like that. But at least she's got a cool name to go to if she can't use Sasha Banks, which she will obviously not be able to use. I mean, we were joking about it on Twitter. Maybe she could just be boss in all caps and an exclamation point as if it was Japan or something like that. But is Japan an option for her? AEW is the one that makes the most sense, obviously. But does she want to go out there? Would she want to go to Japan? Is that a style she would want to work? She's had some injuries and things like that. I mean, who knows? Who knows? And this is all speculation anyway. Now, the reason I opened the door for it is because it's what a lot of people wanted to talk about, Sasha Banks' moods and what's going on. And I have no information. I don't know what her mental state is. I don't know about what any of this stuff is. It seems to be that she's frustrated with her situation. There are a lot of people there frustrated with her situation. Will the grass be greener on the other side for her? I don't know. But one thing is for sure. There are options now. And she looks like one that wants to take some of those options. But we'll have to see what happens. She and Bayley as a team, it's, depending on how long she's there for, how long their contracts are for, to give up on them or to put them down. It's like the Revival. You don't have to put the belts on them. You don't have to feature them or anything like that. But you can still get a lot out of them. And as long as she's willing to come to work, then try to maximize it. I mean, she's still got an incredible base. Maybe it's shrunken. I don't know. I tend to doubt that, though. Some of the reactions that she gets online with just this right here, with people wanting to banter about what Sasha's mental state is and what her status is as far as wrestling goes and what she really wants and all that sort of stuff. So we'll have to see what happens going forward. I don't know if the grass is going to be greener, but one thing is for sure, she'll be working. It's certainly going to be different because she's going to be working with some people, the Hikaru Shidas and things like that. It'll be interesting to see if she were to go to AEW. And again, this is also early in the game with AEW. We've got to see how their women's division shakes out anyway, but I don't know. We'll have to see what happens going forward here. But there are some unique matchups there and some unique things that she could do down in AEW if that happens to be the case. Going to stay with the phone lines right now. Josiah's on the line. Josiah, how are you?
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
I'm okay, I think. All this Sasha Banks stuff, I don't even know where to go with it. People have wanted to talk about it since last week, and it's like, what can you really say until we find out a little bit more, or unless we hear a little bit more? We're kind of up in the air. But what do you want to talk about today?
Well, I actually just got home on Friday from my whole WrestleMania week and all that. It was my first time traveling to a WrestleMania week thing. Although I didn't go to WrestleMania. I went to the 2 MLW tapings. I went to the G1 Supercard. I went to Stardom. And I went to Kaiju Big Battle. And I had a ton of fun.
How was Kaiju Big Battle this year?
It was awesome. It was probably as far as pure fun goes, I think I had more fun at that show than any other show. I mean, not in ring quality or anything like that, but one of the things that I noted was that it made it so easy to cheer the baby faces and boo the heels. It's really simple stuff, but Dr. Cube is evil.
Exactly.
And sorry, go ahead.
Any special guest stars around this? Because like last year with Daisuke Sekimoto as the Hulk and things like that. They did do that last year. Did they have any special drop-ins with so many people that were in town this year?
Not really. They debuted a new character. Party Unicorn came out of retirement to save the day at the end of the night. But they also debuted Dark Unicorn, which is Party Unicorn's brother, and it looks like they're going to be at war in Kaiju Big Battle at the next set of shows.
Well, of course.
But there was nothing really in terms of like special guests or anything like that. But it was just pure fun. What I noted from the
and you made it till Friday up there too. Sorry, you stayed in New York until Friday, or did you decide to drive home and make some different stops off on the way? Because most people come Monday, we're dying to get out of there after staying for WrestleMania.
Yeah. I ended up. Well, it was a 2-week vacation for me, so I ended up going to Las Vegas for a little bit afterwards. So,
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Well, I have friends there, so I stayed there with my friends, and that was that. So, it wasn't much of a vacation. I didn't really do anything when I was there. I was just hung out with my friends, but it was I crossing the continent multiple times. That's hard travel.
Now, is it something you'll do again, or are you happy with the doing it once? You're happy you got it out of the way, or do you think you'll make it to Tampa next year, or try to make this a thing?
I don't know if I'll do Tampa next year, but I'm definitely going to do it again for sure. Although I will note for next time, MLW's TV tapings are 4 hours long, and those are really tiring if you're there. So I can't imagine how those people were live at WrestleMania. It was 7.5 hours long. Well, another note from it too is I think it's going quietly unnoticed, but Filthy Tom is actually really awesome in the ring as a character and all that too. Like he was carrying himself as the MLW champion, and he performed fantastically both nights in MLW. I just liked everything he did, and I saw Stardom live, which was awesome. That was actually a really good show. Yeah, and of course, seeing Okada live is probably the highlight for me because he is the best wrestler in the world. No question in my mind that he's the best wrestler in the world.
So thank you very much for the call. He is. He really is. And there's some other people that you could try to throw up there if you wanted to, and whether Kota Ibushi or Hiroshi Tanahashi still or whatever. I guess it depends on the style that you like, but I mean, clearly, far and away from me, Okada is one of the best, and I think the track that he's on, he's going to go down as one of the all-time best, the way things are going at the rate that they are. Going to stick with the phone lines now. Tim in Miami. Tim, what's up?
Hey, what's up, Mike? Next time you get Ryan on the phone, I'm dying to know whether he keeps a karaoke machine in the back of his car in case the opportunity presents itself to bust it out.
It's possible with him, although I don't know if he's got the time. Although now the tax season is over and his time as a CPA, I'm sure he's raking in all the money. Maybe he's going out on tour and hitting different bars with it. So we'll have to find out next week when he calls. But what's going on, my man?
So I spent, a good portion of today catching up on podcasts that I missed coming out of WrestleMania weekend.
Oh, yeah? Well, you know what? I want you to hold that thought because I'm sure, like all good podcasts, they have bumper music. And you hear the bumper music coming up right now. So Tim wants you to hold on, and we'll get back to what you got going on. Wrestling Observer Live. Mike Sempervive back here again with you. Let us try this again. Tim in Miami. Tim, what's up?
Hey, Mike. As I was saying, I spent, part of today kind of catching up on a lot of the podcasts and things that I missed, the radio shows from this week. And an interesting theme emerged for me in hearing about how WWE is offering, huge money extensions to get guys to stay. And guys are still, like Dean Ambrose, not accepting them. We've heard stories over the past few weeks about, Sasha and the Revival, performers not being afraid to speak out against the creative direction of their characters, outright ask for their release. We had a writer tell Vince McMahon to take this job and stick it, brother. We had WWE fans chanting for another company at a Raw show. And it's remarkable to me because AEW hasn't even run a show yet. But it's causing all of these wrestlers and even fans to be emboldened, and it really speaks to the importance of having a viable domestic alternative, and we've really been robbed of that over the past 18 or so years. So I'm really, really hoping that they're a success.
Do you think they will be? What does your gut say right now? And again, it's way too early. You cannot form a real intelligent decision on things, but what does your gut say? Because I want to be very blunt. My gut right now is not feeling as full as maybe some other people's is, and it's nothing against any digs on the Young Bucks or anything like that. I just wonder if I'm 43 years old. My wrestling history was based and was learned in the 80s and in the territorial style coming up, and I know that they have made overtures to going back to a time where Mid-South sports feel is what they're looking for, but I see some of that roster and I see some of their things that they've done in their past matches and things like that, and I am unsure as it stands right now. What does your gut say?
I am slightly more optimistic because the fact is that there are more former wrestling fans in this country than there are current wrestling fans. And I think there are a lot of people that, if presented with a WWE alternative that was not anything like WWE, I think they'd be willing to give it a chance. And so I hope those people give it a chance. My message to the people who currently watch WWE and buy the network and buy tickets but do nothing but complain about it is that you have no right to complain about WWE if you're not willing to support the alternative. Find a way to watch Double or Nothing. If you can't watch the AEW weekly show, DVR it. You know, it is not going to succeed if we don't support it, and if we don't support it, we have no right to complain about the quality of WWE.
That, Tim, that is like, I was years and years and eons ago in a different time. I was writing for Pro Wrestling Torch, and I remember writing that MLW in its first original incarnation and Impact was not Impact at the time, it was NWA TNA, and it was new, and not really knowing exactly all of the things that were taking place behind the scenes there. It's like, well, you know, folks, with WCW gone, if you don't have access to Japan, and most people did not have access to Japan at the time, you know, these are your other alternatives. You've got to try to go out there and try to support them. Now, in a case like Impact, people tried their best, and they just destroyed every piece of good faith that was ever tossed up there. I'm interested in this day and age where I think that AEW is going to have in some ways a lot more good faith, but anybody that starts too, you have that instant reaction where, you know, it's for every up, there's a down, and there's always somebody taking a shot, and there's slings and arrows and everything else. How do you think, because you have a bunch of seemingly sensitive egos there, Tony Khan has been seemingly gotten to when it comes to his soccer team, not when it comes to the Jaguars, but when the premiership team, he has been in spats publicly with people on Twitter and on Instagram and in social places. The Young Bucks are notorious for blocking people on Twitter and things like that, and you have seemingly a bunch of emotionally charged people. Do you think that's going to cause any issues as a fan? Do you, because you know this deal, and you're on the board, and you're on Twitter, and you see what's going on. What do you think about some of the reactions that AEW has given out to people that seem to be taking shots at them, trolling them, or maybe even asking legitimate questions, and they just don't seem to like them?
Yeah, so to your earlier point, I was one of the dopes who bought those like $10 Jarrett NWA TNA pay-per-views. So there are people out there willing to support them. As far as how everyone
I got a box full of VCR tapes of those stupid things.
Oh, those were terrible. But I gave it every opportunity. But as far as what happens in AEW, my prediction is everything's going to be fine until they achieve some level of success. Once something becomes really successful, that's when all goodwill goes out the window, and everyone starts getting grabby. And everybody, all of a sudden, hey, there's millions of people watching this. I want the featured spot. You know, I want this. I want a bigger stake. It's all going to be fine now where they're trying to build it. The real test will come if and when it's successful.
Tim, I want to thank you very much for the call. Yeah, we'll see. In the social media world, they've done a great job exploiting that, and they also have eaten the back end of it too. It'll be interesting to see what happens, and of course, everything with AEW, like Tim was saying, it's still up in the air right now. The TV deal, which is possibly, maybe, looking like it's Turner. We talked about that a lot last week. You know, there's another mystery suitor that supposedly was there, but everything looks like it's going to be with the people that everybody kind of said at the beginning anyway, or seemed to say at the beginning, which is at some place on Turner, whether it be on TBS, TNT, True TV, some combination of all of them, and Bleacher Report. Who knows? We're still real early. They're still continuing to sign people. They're still continuing to go along on their way. So, again, much like Sasha Banks, this is all speculation, and it's fun to banter about, but we'll have to see what happens as they move forward. And I'm interested to see, too, what the reaction is going to be, because there are a lot of slings and arrows being thrown at AEW, and they haven't even gotten off the ground yet. A lot of praise and a lot of hate already, and this is a time where you really have to eat that, and you really have to be careful on how you navigate it, but it's enough pro wrestling for now. I can't believe we went through this whole show and nobody's talking about UFC 236, which was awesome. It really, really was. It was a hell of a show. And like I said at the beginning, if last week was the high water mark for wrestling, last night was certainly the high water mark for fights. Dustin the Diamond Poirier, unanimous decision over Max Holloway to win the UFC Interim Lightweight Championship, currently held by the suspended Khabib Nurmagomedov. Holloway's 13-fight win streak is over. Poirier gets his 17th win, which I believe is tied for most all-time in the UFC. He is the interim lightweight champion. He has called out Khabib. It looks like that is going to be the fight. That is what Dana White has leaned towards. Whether Conor McGregor can get involved in that or not, I don't know. But it was a really, really super fun fight. And not sure what's going to happen with Max Holloway now. That's going to be kind of a question. Dana White wants him to go back down to 145 pounds. Really the issue there is, who does he face? Alex Volkanovski is going to face Jose Aldo coming up at the next UFC. If Volkanovski wins, that's a new matchup at least. We've already seen Holloway defeat Aldo twice, so you're not going to do that one. You've got Brian Ortega, just lost not all that long ago to Holloway, so he's got the L. Aldo, obviously, he's got L's against him, so I'm not sure what's going to happen. Frankie Edgar is up in the air. I'm not sure what his next fight is going to be. He was supposed to fight the Korean Zombie, and I'm not sure exactly what Edgar's status is right now, but Zombie went on to face Yair Rodriguez, and Rodriguez won that fight, and he's also on the table as a possibility maybe for Max Holloway and a fight for the featherweight championship. So that's going to be a interesting thing. And what happens with Poirier too and Khabib? It's easy to say right now. You got to merge those titles together. That's what Dana is saying right now. But is the lure of Conor, if Conor can get his S together and they can get everything together with him? Do you do that fight just to strike while the iron is hot, just for the money purposes, just so you don't risk Poirier, who I don't believe on paper is going to beat Khabib? It's hard for me to believe anybody is going to beat Khabib. But do you risk that? So we'll have to see what happens there. Conor does hold a win over Poirier. You could do that as well, too. So if he does upset Khabib in a unification fight, you do have that as he goes for revenge and being on a hot streak against Conor. But we'll have to see what happens. Now, why Conor dragged Nate Diaz's name into the mix, I don't know. Nate just, like his brother, I don't even know what his status is right now. His status, I guess, is if you pay him enough, he's going to fight. And if he doesn't want to fight, he won't. It's kind of what it is right now. So we'll have to see what happens there. The other fight, Israel Adesanya and Kelvin Gastelum. Boy, to Kelvin Gastelum. Guts for both Gastelum and Holloway, but they both took some brutal beatings. And it's amazing that both of those fights, in some ways, depending on how you had scored, both came down to the fifth rounds. And, even when the fifth round was going on, as good as Holloway and Gastelum at times looked, especially Holloway, it's just like, man, the momentum was so much on Poirier and Adesanya's side by the time the fifth round started, in my opinion, that it was tough to see how they were going to go any other way. Gastelum looked good early, too. That first round, he looked very good. And he was, Adesanya had him backed up, landed some good shots and everything. But once that first round was over, and he did, I think, he probably won the second round, but as that second round went on, Adesanya just kind of started getting it together. And that Stylebender nickname started to come into play, and he started hitting Gastelum from angles and just launched a brutal beating on him, knocked Gastelum down, I think it was 3 times in the last round, just arguably a 10-7 round. I think he ended up winning on all 3 cards. I'd have to look at what the scores were again. They were not obnoxious or anything like that, but a really impressive performance for Israel Adesanya. And what that will probably lead to is a unification match against Robert Whittaker. 2 guys representing Australia and New Zealand and that area of the world. And I think it was in Melbourne that had the big stadium, the big soccer stadium that the UFC and WWE both ran at. And I think it was the Super Showdown or whatever it was called for WWE ran in that building. And hey, that's the perfect place to do that. And some point this fall, for anything you want to say about UFC, they at least have 2 title fights for the fall coming out of this thing. So good times there for them. Khalil Roundtree also looked really impressive, defeating former University of Alabama football player Eric Anders. You will probably never see Roundtree look that good. Anders was completely overmatched. Roundtree, it has been said, went to Thailand, and you can tell from Muay Thai training, he completely ate up Anders' inside right leg from the time the fight started. He just took an absolute beating. There was no N-swell or ice put on that leg between rounds in the first and second round. They were able to get some more for him later on, but they had no answers for what Roundtree was getting out for Anders. A really gutsy performance from Anders, but just a brutal beating given by Khalil Roundtree, who, again, I don't know if he's going to be able to do this again to anybody else, but it is a part of his game that is really going to make him dangerous. And if his wind can continue to improve, if his stamina continues to improve, he's going to be really dangerous in getting back on the horse again. As I mentioned earlier on, too, and I'll probably have to talk about this a little bit after the break, Rich Ace Franklin announces going in the Pioneer wing of the UFC's Hall of Fame. Franklin is now 44. He's serving as an executive with one fighting championships. Really great for him to get in. He was a good-looking guy, smart guy, tough, talented, and actually had 2 runs with the UFC. He started there in UFC 44, or the UFC 42, but at UFC 44, he opened the pay-per-view portion of that show, knocking out Edwin Deweese. And that was the show where Randy Couture famously and literally spanked Tito Ortiz for the light heavyweight title, and it looked like he was going to be on the path there, but some things kind of changed, and I'll get into that a little bit after the break when we get back. Wrestling Observer Live. Somebody hit me off. Why has Rich Franklin been inducted into the Pioneer wing of the UFC? Because he debuted in November of 1999. And the cutoff era from the modern era is after the year 2000. Yeah, that's how old school he was. One of the last independent contractor style of fighters. Because in between UFC fights, he fought elsewhere. And it was fighting elsewhere where he almost got himself into some serious trouble. It looked as if he was a perfect guy to go up there and maybe fight Ortiz or fight Couture. And that's why the UFC was featuring him. And Dana White liked him a lot. But money's always been an issue between promoters and fighters. And in the UFC, that's certainly been the case, especially in that era. And Dana White was pissed. But what happened was Ace Franklin took a 5-figure payday to face Antonio Inoki's newest creation. A shoot version of himself, basically. The guy who would end up becoming Lyoto Machida. I think he was nicknamed Ryoto at the time. Fought him at the Inoki Bombay Festival. Took the guaranteed money of 5 digits to go over and got knocked out. And it was wondering whether he would ever come back again. He did come back at UFC 50. He fought at middleweight and then fought Ken Shamrock. Survived a heel hook, knocked Shamrock out, and his star went on the rise because that was actually the main event of the Griffin Bonder Ultimate Fighter show. And from there, things kind of changed for Rich Ace Franklin. He became a champion, and he rolled along the way, had 20 fights in the UFC, 14-6. A lot of those losses, you look at who they came against, you wonder against Belfort and some other guys, there was some testosterone issues at play there, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is Rich Ace Franklin is in the Hall of Fame for the UFC, and deservedly so. Absolutely deservedly so. Congratulations to him. Congratulations to me for getting through this show. I was a mess, and I apologize. But the best part about it, I got a chance to do it again tomorrow. Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern, Sundays at 6 p.m. I am Mike Sempervive. I want to thank producer Scott and all everybody that called in and listened. This is Wrestling Observer Live.